Thank you so much, Ann, and thanks for all the work that you and Allison and your whole team does in supporting cities across Arizona with sustainability. And I will say just at the jump, we do have some WA members, and I know that there's some Sustainable Cities Network members that are either new to their jobs or they've been in their jobs for a while, but they're still just an office of one. And I was you. I came to the city of Tempe in 2016 on a 2-year temporary contract. Mark Hartman had advocated at the city of Phoenix, had advocated for my position, telling city council, if you have a position here, they will bring in grants. And then I came on board and he said, Braden will bring in grants. And so I then had to figure out how to work with university partners. Luckily, I had been at ASU and had a lot of relationships within ASU to help figure out how do we create these types of partnerships. If you're just an office of one person in a city, or even if you're, have a few more people, you still need to rely on partnerships. And so today's story that we're telling today is really about how we took some small initial partnerships and grew it to a whole collection of partnerships. We've gone from one person to almost a staff of 10 now at the City of Tempe, and I'm so excited for an opportunity for them to share off all these amazing city-university community partnerships that they are working on today. I want to give a little bit of background to how we got to today, and then you'll be hearing from current City of Tempe staff on the partnerships that are working on. And then I have two very close collaborators at Arizona State University that made a lot of this work happen, Dr. Paul Caseo and Dr. Katya Brunders, and they're going to come in. They've done a lot of reflecting about city-university partnerships, and they're going to give a few pieces of advice about how we grow this work in Tempe, but that's also applicable to how cities and towns and counties can think about moving these types of partnerships forward. So next slide. So those are everyone you're going to hear from today, me, and then so many of the great colleagues that are currently at the City of Tempe, Brianne, Evelyn, Andy, Carissa, and Maddie, and then you'll hear from Paul and Katya at the end, and hopefully we'll have some time for question and answers. Next. So when I first started at the City of Tempe, we had a very small grant from the National League of Cities to work on getting more city departments to be thinking about resilience. So we created a board game called Future Shocks and City Resilience. We played it with department directors and deputy directors to start to get people to think about the types of things that we need to be working on when it comes to resilience and sustainability. And that board game had us think about a variety of shocks that included a pandemic, which we hadn't had yet. It included heat waves, which we were starting to experience more and more in 2016 when we played it. And this was really the initial start of our city-university partnerships, was this project. I had only been at the city for like 2 months when we played this game in November of 2016, but it really helped us understand where the city was at, what type of partnerships, and it was at this meeting that we realized we needed to have our resilience work focus on resilience to extreme heat, because it was a tangible thing that city departments and city leadership could really wrap their arms around. So this was led by Dr. Lauren Withacombe-Keeler. Next slide. We then continued to partner with her, and she was an integral part of our first climate action plan. She helped make recommendations to the city as to how we could structure sustainability at the city, including growing our Office of Sustainability and growing the number of partnerships that we have. And so that really was some very foundational work. And she has a lot that she's published around city-university partnerships in this space. Next slide. So now we get to the place where we had been doing city partnerships for quite some time, and we had a variety of projects that we could build from. So we had worked with Pew Charitable Trust and the Healthy Urban Environments Program at ASU around heat and health data, and had a bunch of projects that we did there. And some of these initial grants were $10,000. The Pew Charitable Trust was $50,000. Small grants to help us move in that direction. We had also started to work on some emergency management and community resilience projects with Human Services and the Tempe Community Council. We had been working with Lauren on our climate action plans. And so we had that work happening. And then we've been doing a bunch of equity work funded by the Vitalist Health Foundation and supported by the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And so we basically use this string of projects over the course of 2016 through 2020, those 4 years, that led us to then be ready for a systems change project. And a systems change project, in my mind, what I want you to think about is a project where you start to think about who are the partners and what are the ideas that could really explode our work and really make us think about things in new ways. And so our opportunity to do that work was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and their Global Ideas Initiative. And I got together with Katya and Paul, and they brought in some more ASU partners, and we brought in some community partners to really envision an ambitious, brand new way of thinking how we were going to do our resilience to extreme heat work and our resilience work overall that was really building on these previous university city partnerships that we had been doing the last several years before. So now, next slide. Systems change projects usually have some big theory of change or big idea. And here we came up with this idea that we were going to start with small actions, build to bigger actions, have a whole agenda for cooling, and really build community, city, university partnerships over time. I think a few key pieces is that one piece was ASU is really helping us support an equity-centered community development-based approach to the work and helping us partner with schools to do that. We then, and Paul really helped lead us and helped focus that effort with a variety of other partners at ASU. We then had Katya helping us work on the city side of things about how we were improving emergency management, how we were improving our infrastructure, and a lot of the changes that needed to happen on the city side, which are represented by prong B. And then we had this really aha moment where we knew we had been told by Maria Rosario Jackson, who's now the head of the National Endowment for the Arts. Paul brought her in as a partner, and she was like, I really think that there's an opportunity here to think about how indigenous knowledge is informing your work. And there's an ASU professor, Wanda de la Costa, that's doing that. And what was interesting, and some of this is you have to find the right funder to do this, but basically we told Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, hey, we're going to fund Wanda and some of her team, and including Selena Martinez, who's was a student and then became a professional through the course of this project. We're going to fund them to help us figure out the role of indigenous knowledge. We're not exactly sure where it's going to lead to in this work, but we know we want to fund it. And that's one of the incredible pieces of what it means to do systems change work is you don't necessarily know the goal in mind for each component of your systems change project, but you know it needs to be a part of the work. And so this is the indigenous knowledge work that you're about to hear a little bit from Brianne. That started with this Robert Wood Johnson work of us including it in the budget and having some programming for it as it matures. And so what you're about to hear from the City of Tempe, you're going to hear about city planning, you're going to hear about neighborhood and school work, and all of that work that's now embodied with full-time professionals doing the work started out of this systems change grant, and that really grew the work. And that systems change work was really work built on 5 years of previous small $10,000 to $50,000 grants that eventually led to this $600,000 grant. So just want to give you a sense of how you can build your grants over time, how you can build them in complexity, how you build them in partnerships. And now we get to hear from the City of Tempe celebrate the work they're doing now to grow brand new city partnerships out of this original work. And I'll pass it over to Brianne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brianne Fisher. I'm the Climate Action Manager for the Sustainability and Resilience Office in Tempe. And as Braden mentioned, one of kind of the prongs or goals of this systems change grant was about developing a better relationship or encouraging reciprocity with tribal leaders, the city and community. And we were able to kind of pair and work with ASU's Indigenous Design Collaborative. They had a cousin grant from the National Endowment of the Arts to work on some guiding principles. These guiding principles are tribal owned. We did not touch them, but we did, when I say we, city partners as well as ASU partners worked together to kind of fine tune and try to provide some guidance on how it could be applicable or implemented at the city. These guides, you can see the 4 principles I've laid out. Culturally significant sites, ancestral presence, natural environment, and creative expression. We were able to have a celebration when this document was completed, and we brought elected officials, other community partners to showcase these principles. So this is just kind of one way that the systems change grant led to an evolution of this guiding principles documents that we as the city can go back to and look at, and it can help guide some decision making both on the city side or private development. We do have hopes of furthering this work even more, but this is just kind of an explanation of what came out of one branch of the systems change grant. And with that, I'll turn it over to Evelyn.
Let me unmute myself. So hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn Brumfield. I am the Youth Climate Action Coordinator for the City of Tempe within the Sustainability and Resilience Office. And just also to pull off, as a jumping off point of where my work comes from, the City of Tempe published a climate action plan. And when it was reviewed and renewed and updated in 2022, the Climate Action Plan update included youth voices, which if you're thinking about things from a sustainability and resilience perspective, youth voices are critical for that. And so when that was updated, youth really spoke out and said that they wanted deeper investments in food access, transportation, and school greening. And so you'll hear and see some of the work that I'm doing around those spaces in students or with students and in schools. But first, I do want to talk about the how that I work with youth, and then later I'll be showing a little bit more of the why and the what. And so in my time with the City of Tempe, the project I've engaged in around youth work have been fun and tough and really varied. And some overarching best practices have emerged on how to work with youth and how to really co-create projects. And so I'm not going to read each individual pillar with you, but the take-home message is the mission statement, and it's to foster a sustainable future by developing a culture where adults act with humility, embrace holistic perspectives, champion inclusivity, and foster youth agency. And so we really, me and anyone I work with in that youth space, really commit to learning from each other, so youth and adults learning from each other and co-creating that livable Tempe. And these pillars of youth engagement were fostered out of collaboration with Carlos Casanova. He's an assistant professor at the Mary Lou Fulton School, which is the teachers college at ASU. Specifically, his work explores socio-political work and community-based organizations and after-school education programs. And he's also a practitioner of the YPAR method of engagement, so that's Youth Participatory Action Research. I highly recommend, if you work with youth, Google that. It is a really great framework around which to engage with youth so that there is that co-creation. And so going off of the pillars in the previous slide, how we engage with youth, it's really important to know why. And so why this matters. If you are working with youth, it might be second nature, but youth are allies of the work that we do in the sustainability space for sure. And this here is Elena. She's a high school student. And this is actually a screenshot of her presenting at her governing board. Youth right now, and again, high school, undergraduate down to even our younger students in second and third grade, really do see the writing on the wall and are hearing sustainability and climate change messages. Elena at the governing board meeting was speaking to the need for more cooling structures or cooling infrastructure on her campus. And so we are definitely investing in those youth and also investing in schools because they are trusted institutions and are already really embedded in local communities. And that is how we like to work in our office. And you'll hear more about that from my colleagues. And so now a little bit of the what that I get to do. This is my high school slide. In the high school system, I primarily work with students, teachers, and occasionally admins. So the bottom-up approach, bottom-up framework. And so you can see the 3 logos on the bottom. For Tempe Union, the 3 spaces that I have been working in involve some interventions with high schoolers. And again, this is all co-creation. So on the slide, you can see some Indigenous informed garden and gathering space plans. So the grassy space is what is there now. The students have really worked with an Indigenous designer to create a more welcoming space rather than a grassy patch there. Another high school that I'm working with wants to do some permaculture gardening, so you can see the plan design there. And then a little bit of a wild card, the 3rd piece at the bottom is an Arizona and US government class learning about the historical sources of heat inequity in Tempe. So really hyper local work around sort of how things got to be the way that they are. And there have been some really great projects that are coming out of that. Another example of the what portion is on the elementary side. So as the high school side, it's more of a bottom-up approach. On the elementary side, it's more of a district level intervention, so a top-down approach. We do a lot of greening in Tempe District 3. And the district, one reason is the school district knows what the schools need in terms of tree infrastructure, or what is also commonly coming up is garden assistance. A lot of gardens in schools are, the infrastructure is there, but the support is lacking. So that could be a teacher or a parent who moved on or their kid moved on, and there's not as much capacity to take up the work. And so one thing that we like to do in our office is not only plant the trees and refresh the gardens, but also provide some holistic support or some programmatic support around making sure that green investment is sustainable in the long run as well. And you'll hear more of that from some of my colleagues. So thank you.
Hi all, my name is Andy Escobar. I'm the Energy Equity Coordinator. Today I will be talking to you about an energy equity project I'm currently working on and how ASU was included. Next slide, thanks. So the project in question is a small-scale mobile home retrofit pilot that will pay for weatherization and energy efficiency upgrades for mobile home residents. We are using a Department of Energy grant and city money to fund this pilot. Mobile homes are the focus because it aligns with grant guidelines regarding equity requirements, but we also narrowed it to this type of housing because of research that ASU's Knowledge Exchange for Resilience and the Healthy Urban Environments have put out. They're also known as Kerr and Hugh. So Kerr and Hugh are both applied research labs that collaborate with organizations like local governments and help support and build community resilience. Other partners include Unlimited Potential for community outreach efforts, Foundation for Senior Living to carry out the retrofit services, and AMHO as thought partners, and as well as individual mobile home management companies to keep them in the loop. Next slide. So back to how we utilized our partnership with ASU and their research and their data. Essentially, this data that I'm going to go over with you all really is the reason that brought our attention to mobile homes and the inequities these communities face. One, we learned through Kerr that mobile home residents are some of the most vulnerable to extreme heat, as they account for 40% of indoor heat associated deaths, while mobile homes only make up 5% of the total housing stock in the state. Two, we also learned that residents frequently lack the financial means or access to financing necessary the home improvements to help them cope with indoor heat. Next slide. Another piece of data that we used from ASU are these heat maps. So this data was developed by the Hue team and NASA Develop for our city. And I'm just going to walk you through these maps. So we call these our heat priority scores. On the left-hand side, you see land surface temperature, so how hot the land is to the touch. And on the right side, you see heat vulnerability, which is how likely a person is to be injured or harmed during periods of hot weather. The black ovals that you see laid on top of the maps show where our mobile home parks are. So as you can see on the left-hand side, they are in areas that have higher land surface temperature. They're also in areas with high heat vulnerability. Next slide. Continuing on with the maps, on the left-hand side, we see vegetation presence, so how many trees and plants are in an area. So you can see in the black ovals, mobile home parks are in areas with low vegetation presence. And so once we overlay those environmental and social factors, we get the map on the right, and we call these our heat priority scores, and they help show which areas of Tempe have the highest heat priority. So as you can see in the ovals, mobile home parks are in areas that test for 4 and 5, meaning they're the first and second priority areas for the city. So this data that we've received from ASU really has significantly contributed to building the case for why this work is crucial for our city and its residents. It also helps justify our equity lens. With that said, I'm going to pass it over to Carissa so that she can continue the presentation, but I can address any questions at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. My name is Carissa Fowler, and I'm the Heat Mitigation Resilience Specialist. And my work is focused on establishing a resilience hub network that can help Tempe's be more resilient in the face of hazards and everyday challenges. Next slide. So investing in resilience hubs is a main highlight action in our climate action plan update that Evelyn talked about at the beginning as well. And this is with the goal of increasing community connections and our ability to respond as a community to hazards, especially extreme heat and everyday challenges. So we know that our community is empathetic in Tempe and wants to give back, but oftentimes when there is an emergency, there's this misalignment in what is truly needed and what the community can offer. So the goal of this work is aligning and coordinating those community needs with that community agency that exists. Next slide, please. So resilience hubs are trusted community facilities designed to assist residents in their daily lives, respond effectively during emergencies, and aid in recovery. The resilience hubs are the physical infrastructure of community social capacity building by offering trusted spaces for networks to be formed, relationships to be built, and for that agency to flourish. And the idea here is to have a network of these resilience hubs that serve the community daily and during disruptions in different ways. And it's this bottom-up grassroots approach to emergency management and everyday programming that really shifts the power and the confidence to residents and organizations that have agency. Next slide. So again, it's this bottom-up grassroots approach that we're trying to make sure that the community has kind of the space to leverage their own assets. You know, communities are already resilient. It's just about understanding where the assets are in the area and how to mobilize those during a time of need. Next slide. So to pilot this project, we're working with 8 faith-based organizations that have experience with stepping up and serving their community both every day and during disruptions. And these sites will go through a series of assessments, activities, and workshops to get them thinking about what it looks like and what it means to act as a resilience hub for their community, whether that be through daily programs and services or emergency services like offering heat relief or being a shelter for residents during a power outage. Next slide, please. So we are partnering with ASU and a local organization called Rail CDC to collectively apply for an EPA community change grant. And through this grant, we'll be able to staff, program, and install a microgrid, which is solar plus battery storage on our Tempe Envision Center, and you'll see some pictures on the right. And this Envision Center is a city-owned resilience hub where we will offer relevant programs and services that the community has helped create, and will be able to continue operations during a power outage through that battery storage. Next slide. So the overall goal of this initiative is to have a network of these hubs that offer different services, have a network of neighborhood leaders and community-based organizations that help coordinate everyday programs and community disruption response services, really utilizing the community's assets, connections, and skills. So this resilience hub approach allows us to plan with the community, not for the community. And our role as a city is just to provide resources, tools, and help with coordination so that the community can have space to leverage their own agency and assets when they need it most. And with that, I'll pass it to Maddie. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Mercer, and I am our team's Neighborhood Resilience Coordinator. And today I'll be talking about some of our nature-based solutions for extreme heat and some of the other challenges that my colleagues have discussed. Next slide. So as some have mentioned, we are driven by our climate action plan update and the agendas that outline how different stakeholder groups want us to address climate action. And these nature-based solutions that I'll address are really tied closely to the youth agenda, where Evelyn mentioned a focus on food and cooling, as well as the neighborhood agenda that Carissa just spoke about in terms of neighborhood level resilience to extreme heat. Next slide. So the first project I'll talk about is called Grow Local Tempe, and this is funded by a USDA Urban Ag and Innovative Production Planning Grant. And planning is what this project has been all about for the last 1.5 years. So it's really focused on how we can expand urban agriculture and food access through community engagement and coalition building. So doing more of what Carissa spoke about, planning with the community and not for them when it comes to implementing new solutions tied to local food. And so the 3 main parts of this project have been trying to first understand what the current state of the Tempe food system and urban agriculture is, identify what residents' needs are when it comes to food access and what their vision is for what their neighborhood food system should look like, and then co-developing plans and strategies for how we can expand food access through urban agriculture and the other solutions that we've identified with the community. Next slide. So on this slide here, we have some of our partners for this Grow Local Tempe project. We work really closely with community-based organizations and the ASU Sweetie Center for Sustainable Food Systems team to make sure that this process is very grounded in community and focused on building connection and trust before we do any of that planning. And so I've got a picture here from one of our community events where we're focused on providing some education and insight on what some opportunities for urban agriculture are, what are the solutions beyond some traditional models like a community garden, and then really empowering community members to identify ones that best align with their needs. And so our approach to this work is really focused on reducing barriers to participation, making sure that we're meeting people where they are and making it as easy as possible for them to give feedback on our plans and participate in this work, and then centering those community needs and visions for what the food system should look like in all of the work that we're doing. Next slide. So some of our deliverables that we've worked really closely with the ASU Sweetie Center team to develop have been focused on that assessment and planning piece. So on the right here is a picture of our community food asset map, where we worked with a team of ASU students and staff to identify existing food initiatives in Tempe. So we've mapped things like existing community gardens and community supported agriculture CSA pickup boxes, as well as sites of emergency food access. We've worked closely with the stakeholders from the slide before to develop interactive workshops where we identify some of these solutions that people want to see and turn them into pilot project plans that we've gotten repeated, we've had repeated conversations with the community about to get feedback, because this is really an iterative process to make sure that the ideas that we're coming up with are best aligned with what the community actually wants to participate in. And then the Sweetie Center team has been instrumental in putting together some policy recommendations for how the city can best support urban agriculture and local food moving forward through both through both this community research, where we've worked to identify those community food needs, as well as best practices from other cities around the country that are leading in this local food space, so that we can understand what our role as a city is in advancing food access through urban agriculture. Next slide. So transitioning to another project called Growing Together. This work is new, recently funded by a USDA urban forestry grant and a Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management grant to expand our urban forest in the city to promote equitable urban cooling and create opportunities for workforce development and community wealth building. And so this project has three main components. The first will involve a community tree stewards program, where we'll pay Tempe residents who live in high heat neighborhoods with low tree canopy coverage to learn how to grow, plant, and maintain trees in their neighbors' yards and public spaces, so that we can help cool the neighborhood, working with the people who actually live there and know the space as well. We'll also be developing a school greening and grounds maintenance program, where we can increase the capacity of school staff to green their campuses. So as Evelyn mentioned in some of the work that we do with schools, there's a lot of need and knowledge at the schools on where shade is needed and cooling is needed, but a lot of times there's limited capacity to install and maintain that infrastructure. And so we'll be adding some new temporary staff roles who can help provide support for those functions. And the last piece will involve two new food forest projects that will help to both provide shade and cooling and increase community food access. And these pilot projects were the sites and plans built through the Grow Local, two of the sites and plans built through the Grow Local Tempe grant. Next slide. So in this work, we'll be working closely with the ASU Walton Sustainability Solutions Service. They were the lead applicant on the USDA Forest Service grant. And so we are one of their regional partners. We've got some collaborators from the city of Mesa and the city of Phoenix, as well as community-based organizations that are working together to implement different models of workforce development and training, so that we can share best practices and engage communities in different ways. We'll also be working with the town of Guadalupe, the Tempe Elementary School District, and then our community-based organization partners, Rail CDC and Unlimited Potential. And again, this work is very focused on capacity building and economic mobility at the neighborhood level. So working with community members where they're at, because they know their community best and will be the best partners to scale this work moving forward. Next slide. So in terms of university partnership in this space, like I mentioned, we're part of a larger urban forestry accelerator initiative. And so we'll do more of this neighborhood level planning, where we try to better understand what are some of the needs around urban cooling and how can we use green infrastructure to address those needs at the neighborhood level. We'll also be working on implementing different workforce programs. So the City of Tempe will have our community tree stewards programs and can learn from other cities and organizations using different models, so that we can learn and exchange what works best for what group. And then we'll also be creating new pathways for education, entrepreneurship, and business development and credentialing within the industry, so that we can start moving that systems change piece forward and recognizing the talent and skill that it takes in this industry to create shade and cooling for our communities.
Okay, excellent. So excited to be here to from the university side to report out a little bit on kind of our reflection of the partnership over the last several years. Myself and Katja Brunders really have been going through and trying to create a report and document in a collaboration with the city and other partners to really reflect on this. Next slide. So from the university perspective in particular, I think one of the things that we have found that we're really useful for others that are interested in starting similar partnerships is really to have that sort of integrator. Braden was that early on, and I think Brianne, Evelyn, Maddie, Andy, all of those folks that you just heard from are really excellent partners, and you can see the diversity of different parts of the university that they've connected with. And so those are really kind of critical people to be able to not only integrate across departments, but also within ASU to be able to really leverage one, the sort of hunger that we have as academics to really have more impact in the world, and invest in our local communities as well. So the other piece there is that we really benefited from an intergovernmental agreement that was it took a while to get going, but once that was in place, we really understood and we were aligned in terms of the needs and the offerings of the city and how we could match that to the university's capacity. And on the university side, kind of coming back, in terms of ASU has ASU's design aspirations about community social embeddedness. We have leveraging place. These are all things that really are core to what we do at ASU. And so we were able to actually then translate a lot of the outcomes back into ASU to be able to do things like new hires, building out diversity representation that we learned as part of the partnership. We're creating new curriculum, offering more place-based ways of knowing and working, and working within ASU in different centers that have been developed. In particular, one thing I'm super excited with the design school is through the Indigenous Design Collaborative and Wanda de la Costa, we're going to actually be starting a new degree called the Master of Science in Indigenous Placekeeping and Design in fall of 24. And we're just in the process of hiring faculty to be a joint hire between landscape architecture, urban design, environmental design, and this new program. So we're sort of building out those spaces. And you heard all the great work in terms of the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience and also the RCE Greater Phoenix. RCE is a regional center of expertise on education. And so there's all these institutional changes also happening on the ASU side as benefit of this particular project and partnership. So I'm going to turn this over to Katya.
Thank you. And I realize I'm just standing between you and the discussion of this very inspiring presentation. So I keep it very short. I wanted to offer some reflections on the roles that we had as researchers in this project. And you will see these roles were quite diverse. First of all, we could offer contributions as researchers, but also as project managers. And so with this, I think we were really very close, working at the interface with the City of Tempe, having 1 foot almost in the city and 1.5 feet in ASU, acting on the ASU side as an integrator and trying to facilitate that. We were also not just doing research as one might think, that we just gather data and do our own things. We really wanted to be a convener, a co-collaborator, and that meant that we also really engaged in project management. And overall, over the 3 years, we jointly engaged in some 280 meetings. We had core weekly meetings with our partners at the City of Tempe. We had meetings with our various working groups in the Bronx, etc. And so if you have these regular meetings, that quickly sums up, but it's inevitable to have these meetings and really invest in people and invest at that time that needs to grow those relationships. And from the perspective of our sponsor, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we also often heard that we were one of the grantees that had a city-university partnership with the extension into the community, and this was very valued from them. And they were also keenly interested to hear both sides, the practice side and the research side, and especially how these two sides come together. In addition to being researchers and project managers, we also acted as a liaison to strengthen the network. Both Braden and Paul and all the other speakers before us mentioned how ASU was able to contribute, and often one of us helped bring people in so that we had new collaborators like Carlos Casanova. And through the new collaborators also opens a network to new funding opportunities that often led into funding opportunities that were with PIs from both ASU and the city. We also really paid attention that our project, Cool Kids, was obviously focused on the young generation in Tempe, but we also had the young generation at ASU in mind, the students, and it was really wonderful to work with some 85 students over those 3 years, and we had, I think, 24 real projects. We worked with students one-on-one. You can envision master thesis, internships, these kind PhD students specifically on how to design a city-university partnership. But then you can also think of courses, workshops. Lauren Witte-Comkila had such a workshop, as Braden was talking about the climate action plan. We also had design workshops, mostly led by Paul. And it was wonderful to see some of the students who were with us are now here working at the City of Tempe. So we cannot underestimate what it means to make education real by providing them real-world learning opportunities on such projects. And all in all, we were not just contributing, mostly, we also really benefited. We grew personally, and we received so much guidance on what saliency means, what credibility means, not just from an academic standpoint, but from a social standpoint, and also what is the legitimacy of our work. We have metrics from an academic point of view to measure that, but I think, as Paul mentioned, for us working at this interface, it was important to also receive legitimacy on the work from a broader perspective, from the people we work with within the city and in the community. Overall, I think because we are still paid by the university, we still need to strive that balance between academic work and applied work to support the co-production of knowledge and practice. And we had a very interesting and very valuable experience on this, and we are grateful for that experience. With this, I hand it back to our hosts, and thank you all for the wonderful presentations.